Rama asked, "Lord, I am puzzled by your statement that even the gods like Vishnu and Shiva are part of this ignorance or avidya. Pray explain that statement further." So Vishnu and Shiva, depending on which sect you belong to, are regarded as the supreme deities. Now Rama, being of a respectable disposition, is curious that the gods are not always described as enlightened. And in fact, the Brahma, the creator god, is really identified with Maya, delusion. Creation was a lapse. The creation of Brahma, Brahma's creation was a lapse in his own awareness. And eventually he became enlightened. This unenlightened status of the gods is a problem for Rama, who obviously does his religious duties, and a lot of that involves worshipping these gods. But the role of the gods is traditionally not spiritual. The role of the gods is as a means to material success. You pray to the gods if you want a child, or you want a spouse, or you want good health, or you want success. So the problem here is trying to integrate the gods into a spiritual framework, whereas the gods themselves are not really spiritual at all. It can be useful to think in terms of gods, because the gods often represent aspects of our own psyche. Relating to the gods can be a way of working with our own psyche. So let's see what Vasishta says. The truth, or existence-consciousness-bliss absolute. This is the famous Sat-cit-ananda, which is supposed to be a description of the absolute in as much as you can describe the absolute. The truth, or existence-consciousness-bliss absolute, is beyond thought and understanding. It is supreme peace and omnipresent. It transcends imagination and description. And it's not a god or God. There arises naturally in it the faculty of conceptualization. This is our cognitive process. This self-understanding is considered to be threefold: subtle, middling, and gross. The intellect that comprehends these three regards them as Satva, Rajas, and Tamas. So as part of our conceptualization, we attribute qualities to things. Satva, Rajas, and Tamas is a particular categorization of qualities. The three together constitute what is known as prakriti, or nature. Avidya, or ignorance, is prakriti, or nature, and it is threefold. This is the source of all beings. Beyond it is the supreme. So you have various degrees of awareness, various degrees of attachment to concepts, and that gets the whole thing going. Once you start believing in concepts and in your notions, once you start identifying your passions with these notions, they start breeding other notions and relationships between notions. And this gives rise to prakriti, or nature. So avidya, or ignorance, or nature, is the source of all things, and beyond it, or underlying it, is the supreme, or all these take place within the supreme. These three qualities of nature, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, are subdivided again into three each, that is, the subtle, middling, and gross of each of these. Thus you have 9 categories. These 9 qualities constitute the entire universe. The sages, the ascetics, the perfected ones, the dwellers of the netherworld, the celestials, the gods, these are the satvic part of ignorance. So these are the satvic beings. Among these, the celestials and the dwellers of the netherworld form the gross tamas. the sages form the middling rajas, and the gods Vishnu, Shiva, etc. form the satvic part. So the gods are the satvic part of the satvic division. So they're the top ones in terms of moral categories. They who come under the category of Satva are not born again, hence they are considered liberated. They exist as long as the world lasts, and they usually get liberated at the end of the world cycle. The others, like the sages, who are liberated while living, Jivan Mukta, shed their body in course of time, reach the abode of the gods, dwell there during the period of the existence of the world, and then they are liberated. So they're the middling ones. Thus this part of avidya or ignorance has become vidya or self-knowledge. Avidya, ignorance, arises in vidya, self-knowledge, just as ripples arise in the ocean. And in vidya, ignorance dissolves in self-knowledge, vidya, just as ripples dissolve in the water. So the ripples arise and then they subside. But we've got to be careful about this image of subsiding ripples. We don't need the ripples to subside, because it's about where the identification is. Is it with the ripples, or is it with the ocean itself? We've got this yogic tendency which says we need to get the ripples to subside and be calm. But no, we don't. All we've got to do is turn the attention from the ripples to the attention itself, which is the ocean. The distinction between the ripples and the water is unreal and verbal. Even so, the distinction between ignorance and knowledge is unreal and verbal. There is neither ignorance here nor even knowledge. Depends what you mean by knowledge. Knowledge is certainly not concepts. And if you've gone beyond concepts, then the concepts of ignorance and knowledge become irrelevant. When you cease to see knowledge and ignorance as two distinct entities, what exists alone exists. This is the stream of experiencing. The reflection of vidya, that's self-knowledge in itself, is considered avidya. This is when it gives rise to concepts. When these two notions are abandoned, what remains is the truth. It may be something or it may be nothing. We can categorize it any way we like, but we're not going to categorize it at all. It is omnipotent, it is more empty than space, and yet it is not empty because it is full of consciousness. Like the space within a pot, it is indestructible and everywhere. It is the reality in all things. Just as a magnet makes iron filings move by its very presence, it causes cosmic motion without intending to do so. Hence it is said that it does nothing at all. That's an interesting simile. It's like a big force field, in other words, isn't it? A big field of potential. Potential for an infinite number of notions and motions of these notions. Emotions.